Does Marc Bergevin finally have the goods to land a top-tier sniper? We'll find out on this week's Hockey Inside Out. Welcome to this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. We're back. Looks like we're going to be back for most of October. This week's show is being brought to you by Madison's New York Grill and Bar in downtown Montreal. That's the one on Drummond Street across from the Bell Center. All right, joining me today is former Montreal-Canadiens defenseman Rick Green, from the Montreal Gazette, Stu Cowan, and CBC Daybreak's Jessica Rusnak. Oh, how much things change. Last year at this time, I was double kissing strangers in the streets and having close talking conversations with people in bars. And the Canadiens were not nearly as flush with promising young prospects and draft picks as they are heading into this year's draft. For the first time in Marc Bergevin's career as general manager, it's safe to say that the team's window to win a Stanley Cup under his tenure is now. Considering all that the Canadiens have to offer other teams, do you think Marc Bergevin will be able to pull off a big trade and land a top-line sniper?
Well, Marc Bergevin has said in the past he doesn't believe in windows. He should. Shea Weber and Carey Price aren't getting any younger. Neither is Brendan Gallagher with all the injuries he's gone through. And the time is now, I think, for him to do something to find a goal scorer, which is what this team really needs. I mean, you look the last 2 years, they were in the playoffs. Carey Price was outstanding, but they couldn't score. That's why they were eliminated in the first round. So he has draft picks. He has young prospects. He has cap room. He's in a perfect situation right now. And especially with COVID, there's going to be a lot of teams not only worried about the NHL salary cap, but maybe a salary cap imposed by their owners that's even lower because of the way the business world is going. So I think this is the perfect opportunity. This is a team that's won one playoff series in the last 5 years. And that goal of, well, let's just get into the playoffs and see what happens with Carey Price. Well, we've seen what happens with Carey Price. He plays great and they still lose. So I think he's reached a point now where Marc Bergevin needs to make some kind of a deal this offseason to bring in a bona fide scorer.
I agree with you, Stu. I think, like you said, the time is now. Prospects are exactly that, hoping that they're going to turn out and going to be able to contribute in a big way. But right now, with the age of some of their veteran players, they have to find a way to surround them with some players that can play now and, help them to move forward in trying to achieve that goal of getting in the playoffs and getting a chance for the Stanley Cup. And I think that his phone is probably ringing quite a bit, and I think that he's entertaining many ideas to find a way to get somebody in to help them in their scoring department.
And it's the perfect opportunity now, like we said, the stars have aligned for Marc Bergevin. But I think he has to be willing to part with some of his prospects. And I think that's been an issue with Marc Bergevin, is that there's certain players that he's not willing to part with, but he's going to have to realize that he has to do that. My other concern is some of these top players, they have, limited no trade clauses or a list of teams that they would not go to. And I wonder if Montreal is on some of those players' lists, or if they would say, you know what's going on in Montreal right now, they don't really look like a Stanley Cup contending team, so I'm going to pass and I'm not going to waive it. So I wonder if that might be some difficulty for Marc Bergevin to get the other general manager to convince their player to come here.
The other possibility for him also was an offer sheet. I mean, he tried it last year with Sebastian Aho and it blew up in his face. But as I mentioned before, there's so many teams, these NHL owners own other businesses, and those other businesses have been impacted by COVID also. For Jeff Molson, I'm sure the beer business is probably good during COVID, but the Bell Center is empty. There's no concerts. So his business, the Groupe CH, is losing money. So other owners are in a similar situation. So other owners might not want to spend up to the cap and might not be willing to match an offer sheet. I mean, if we were in the COVID situation last year when he made the offer sheet for Sebastian Aho, maybe the Hurricanes owner doesn't match it at that point. So I think that's something that Bergevin has to keep in mind, and I'm sure he is, that could be a possibility of a way to get a scorer here.
There's been rumors of the Canadiens courting Patrick Laney. Do you see them landing someone of him or someone of that stature?
Well, I think they really have to make a real big attempt to try and get a player like that. Obviously, it's going to cost something, but the old story, you have to give up something to get something back. And he's a bona fide goal scorer. He's a guy that could probably step in, obviously, and make huge contributions in the scoring department. And he's big, and he can make things happen. And I feel that he should, or they should really make a serious attempt on trying to put something together to find a way to land him in Montreal and then, go from there.
Okay, the Canadiens
I
have.
agree with you, Rick, because, I mean, when you look at where the Canadiens were in Winnipeg this past season, I stood beside Laney in the locker room, and I'm 6'3" and about 210 pounds or whatever, and he's big. He's bigger than me. He's a big, big guy. I was surprised when you see him with his equipment off, just how big he is and how strong he is. And you imagine him on a line with Nick Suzuki, with the playmaking skills we saw with Nick Suzuki. The fact he's a winger, I think, makes him a good fit here, because the Canadiens now, believe it or not, shockingly have some depth at center. So bringing in a winger who can score, I think, would really work well.
And
I know that he told Joel Montreal that he's not necessarily too keen on trying to get him to come here, but you never know with Marc Bergevin. Maybe he's kind of saying that right now, and then could pull off a big move. But I think it's going to be definitely difficult to get him to Montreal.
Yeah, Marc Bergevin said he wasn't going to trade PK Subban also, so he keeps his cards close to his vest. That's one of the things Marc Bergevin is really, really good at.
And Winnipeg is strongly on the defensive side with, they're very, very thin with their defensive core, I believe. And Montreal has some pretty good players that might become attractive to Winnipeg if they had to sweeten the deal to find a way to get a nice big winger that can make things happen.
The Canadiens haven't had much success drafting outside the top 10. Do you think they should try to move up or move down?
Well, depends what happens on draft day. I mean, it's so hard to predict draft day because you never know what's going to happen, who the teams ahead of you are going to pick, what trades might be made, etc. So it's really hard to predict. I mean, it makes sense to move up if they can. I mean, you look at the history of 16th overall draft picks in the NHL. There's not a ton of guys that have gone on to be superstars. But I think as we mentioned, I think it's something you can package. You can package that pick with some prospects and maybe a couple of players. Max Domi's name is out there too. And see what you can get.
I think for draft day as well and see what kind of moves are made. If you think about a few years ago, no one thought the Montreal-Canadiens were going to take Jesperi Kotkaniemi with the 3rd overall pick. So there could be some surprises of certain players that you thought would be gone. And then you might say, oh, you know what, maybe we should try and move up because I didn't think he would be available at this point. Or maybe we might say, you know what, all the players that we had on our radar right now are already gone. Let's sort of sit back and see if we can trade our draft pick for a little bit lower and get something from there. So I think it all depends. It's like a domino effect to see what happens that day.
Yeah, and you're hoping that the staff, their scouting staff, have got all the names in place and possible availability in the event that on draft day this name pops up and they might be able to steal a player, so to speak, or find one that they didn't expect to be available. And it all depends on the cycle through the draft as far as who takes who and who becomes available and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of variables there, and I'm sure that they are looking at all scenarios at this point.
Yeah, Bergevin's been reluctant in the past to trade draft picks, and he's stockpiled a lot of picks and a lot of prospects now, but I said now's the time, and I know Bergevin was on TSN 690 with Tony Marinaro the other day, and he said he is willing to trade the pick this year. So that's something to watch leading up to the draft.
Roughly 2 weeks ago, the Montreal Canadiens acquired Joel Edmundson from Carolina. How do you see him affecting the Canadiens' blue line?
To me, he shores up an area that they were still pretty good at, and now basically I think he puts a lot of pressure on a guy like Mete, and it's not going to be easy for him to find a spot, maybe as a 7th defenseman. But it's a good move. I like what I see on their blue line, and I think there's a lot of positive there from where they are today compared to what they were last year.
Yeah, with Edmundson, he's another Ben Sherratt type player, and Ben Sherratt was so good last season. He just got better as the season went along. The physical style of play, I think he forced Shea Weber to be more physical. I think the way that Sherratt was so physical playing beside him, I think Weber picked up his physical game. He was more physical than I've seen him since he's come to Montreal. And now Edmundson's going to play with Petry, and that's a good matchup. Yeah, Petry, I think, is an underrated defenseman, the way he skates, the way he moves the puck, and now to have that big physical guy beside him, I think is going to help. You mentioned Mete, Rick. I wonder if he's one of the prospects or one of the young guys that Bergevin might be looking to move, because when you look at the depth chart now in defense, you wonder where he fits in. Does he fit in as a 3rd pairing defenseman? He doesn't put up a lot of points, Mete, but he's great at skating the puck out of his zone and moving the puck. He's sort of like a modern type day defenseman. So I think other teams might be interested in him. So you wonder about his future with the team. But with Edmundson, I think it's sort of when Bergevin saw the impact that Sherrod had on the team, I think he said, let's try and find another guy like that. And that's what he did.
And
it's important to fill that blue line as well, because that has been one of the areas that they've really struggled with for a long time now. And, if you look at Marc Bergevin's history being a former defenseman himself, and he always said you can never have too many defensemen. I think it's good to go out, get a guy who has some NHL experience, who's 27 years old, and not just kind of wait for younger players to come up through the lineup.
And I really like the way Kulak and Fleury, have performed. I think they're ahead of Mete. I think that the chance, unless there's big surprises, Mete, I think, is on the outside looking in at this point. And he might be a name that you throw out there because he is a good skater. Yes, he moves the puck. He's small, but that's about it. And he's not, he's not the ultimate defenseman in my view for what the Canadians can have in their top six.
Yeah, and Kulak played so well in the postseason, and he's another physical guy, and I think he slots in perfectly as a third pairing defenseman. I don't think you can play Brett Kulak. I think the more Brett Kulak plays in a game, the more likely he is to make mistakes, and he has a problem getting over his mistakes. He gets down on himself a little bit. So I think he slots in perfectly as a third pairing defense. And I'm mentioning about Edmundson being physical. The thing about Petry also, I think a lot of people don't realize just how big and strong Jeff Petry is. He's a physical presence out there too. So, Sherrod and Weber weren't much fun to play against. And I don't think Edmundson and Petry will be much fun to play against either. Big physical defense. And I think it was a really good move by Bergevin to get Edmundson here.
Last week, Marc Bergevin signed 32-year-old Jeff Petry to a 4-year, $25 million contract extension. What are your thoughts on that?
I like this signing. I find Jeff Petry has been a very good player for the Montreal-Canadiens since they traded for him a few years ago from Edmonton. He loves it here in Montreal. He's really a veteran player on this team, or I should say a leadership player on this team. And he's showed that he's able to step up when they need him, with Shea Weber being injured and Jeff Petry having to log a lot of minutes. He's been a very useful player for the Montreal Canadiens, and I think it's important to have some form of consistency on this team. And having Jeff Petry out there, I think I really enjoyed having the signing.
Yeah, I think it was a really good move by Bergevin. I was a little bit surprised because when Petry spoke at a video conference after the playoffs ended, he talked about different things that would factor into it, including his kids' schooling, etc. His kids are young; they're just getting to school age. And he's a guy from Detroit. His off-season home's in Detroit. His dad pitched for the Tigers, and I thought maybe the Detroit Red Wings might be in the back of his mind as a good spot. But having said that, also his wife and Carey Price's wife are close friends. Their kids are great friends. They play together and that. So I think that probably factored into it also. They're settled on the South Shore of Montreal near the Canadiens practice facility. They have a home there. The Prices live nearby. So I think that factored into it also. And Petry has said how much he enjoys playing at the Bell Center. As I mentioned earlier, I think he's one of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL. He's in amazing physical condition. He's one of those guys who's probably got 4% body fat or something on him. Big shot, can skate, can do it all. Again, the age doesn't really worry me because he's just in such fantastic condition. He's such a beautiful skater. I think it was a good move, and to time up for that long, I think was really smart by Marc Bergevin.
And I think it's, like you said, it's great to hear that he really wanted to stay here in Montreal. His family likes it, and he enjoys the city, and he wants to be part of the Montreal Canadiens. And with a player like that don't come around very often, with his size and skill set, you can't let somebody like that go when he's performed the way he's performed. And I'm very, very happy for him and his family. And it's nothing but a bonus for the guys on the defensive core.
Yeah, and I'm happy for Petry's just a good guy. When you deal with him on a daily basis, he's a good guy. He seems to have a really nice family, his wife and kids. So it's I'm happy for him, and I'm happy for the Canes. I think it was a really good move.
I'm happy to see videos of his son and just how it's at the Bell Center.
I get a chuckle every time I show up at the Bell Center an hour and a half or so before the games, and right outside the Canadiens locker room, the players are doing their pregame warm-ups and that, and Petry's three boys are running around like crazy, and his wife's sort of standing outside the wives' room, sort of happy to get a break from taking care of all of them. So it's a really fun thing to watch when you show up at the Bell Center.
And it's also nice to see, as an American, because there's a lot of them that say, what, I don't want to come in to be taxed here in Quebec. So I would rather lean towards someplace in the U.S. We've seen that before, but he obviously prioritized the fact that he loves it here. He wants to be part of the Canadiens family, and it's a great move.
So now that the playoffs are over and Habs fans were lucky enough to get to see the Canadiens in the playoffs, what was your main takeaway from the NHL's playoff bubble experiment, and what do you think the Canadiens as a team learned from it?
Well, I'm happy that it was able to work out because going into it, it's a risky situation to have everyone in a bubble. And if there's an outbreak, well, then that's the end of the playoffs. But they had no cases of COVID-19, which was great. But I think it was very hard for the players being away from their family. And a lot of them kind of got bored after a long period of time, not really being able to have that kind of free time to just roam around the street, do whatever you would do on a regular basis, that you were really confined to your hotel that you were staying at. But I thought it was great for the Canadiens and how they were able to pull off an upset against the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think that gave them some confidence that will hopefully roll into next year. And it also showed that Carey Price is not past his prime, and a rested Carey Price is definitely what you need. So I think that's one of the major takeaways from the Canadiens playoffs. And then it was great to see management realize that too and get an actual backup goaltender for Carey Price and Jake Allen.
I think you also have to compliment the NHL, because I was really suspect on whether or not they were going to pull this off. It was just, I thought, an accident waiting to happen, but they did it. They got through it. And, I think from the Canadian standpoint, it comes back to the fact that they just got a taste of what it's like when the new season of playoffs starts, and how much success you can have if you get certain players going at certain times that maybe exceed their expectations. And I think it was a real learning for a lot of those guys on the team. And I think they're probably looking forward to maybe having a taste of trying to do it again.
Yeah, and as we were talking about Jeff Petry earlier, he mentioned one of the reasons he signed with the Canadiens is the way they played in the postseason, and the way the young guys, Kotkaniemi and Suzuki, played, and gave them hope for the future that the Canadiens will be in the postseason more regularly. You can't buy experience. So the experience that these young players went through, Kotkaniemi and Suzuki in particular, proving to themselves that they can play at that level, I think was huge. On the other hand of that, also, it was 10 games after a 5-month break. So there's no guarantee that Suzuki and Kotkaniemi are going to step up and play the same way for 82 games next season. It's a big difference. But the experience will definitely help them on that front. As for the NHL, I mean, I said on this show, I wrote in the Gazette many times, I never thought they'd pull this off. I didn't even think the playoffs would start. I thought once the players all returned to their home cities for training camps, that the cases would blow up. They didn't. Kudos to the players. And Gary Bettman takes a lot of heat, but he deserves full credit for putting together this plan. Obviously, a lot of other people worked with him, but he's the guy who put it together, pulled it off flawlessly. And it was sort of sad, though, to see the Tampa Bay Lightning returning home to Tampa with the cup. And, oh my gosh. Sorry about that, guys.
Whose kids are those?
To see the Tampa Bay Lightning return home and have a party with their fans, like, do they not realize why they were in a bubble for 2.5 months? And Alex Killorn thanking the governor of Florida for opening the bar so they could go celebrate. So they pulled it off, but I'm going to be interested to see how many positive COVID-19 cases you might see with the Lightning in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think your dogs are very upset about this celebration.
That's it.
Well, that's all the time that we have for this week's show. We will be back next week as well as the week after. This week's show has been brought to you by Madison's New York Grill and Bar in downtown Montreal on Drummond Street across from the Bell Center. All right. What moves would you like to see Marc Bergevin make during the draft? What free agents would you like to see him trade for or see on the team? Let us know in the comments section below. My name is Adam Susser, and we'll see you back here next week.